Okay, so vegetables, so similar, and this is pulling out. So that was horticulture as a whole, vegetables and profitability. Look, some really key things now starting to still flow on for that earlier project, Bryn, that was initiated by Vegetables WA, is now flowing into this building business capacity project, and that is saleable yield. And this sounds like a oh yeah, that's common sense, but this is really now the key thing that is driving the difference between those that are actually in the top 25% and making really good returns off their assets. And market access is obviously becoming the other one. So no, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be big to have market access. It's about relationships with customers and buyers. Obviously scale certainly helps if you've got more to sell, but that aside, I think if you've got good production systems, you have good yields and you sell a good product, then you actually have a good place to negotiate. And we're certainly seeing that come through. The third point then, focusing on a limited range of products. I think that is becoming a key component of any business, and it's a simplified business. It means that the growers, the growing system, the employees, the management staff, everyone's on the same page as to what needs to be done. It's very regular. So that's becoming something that's we're pulling out as those that are an attribute of the key top 25%. So they're keeping things very simple. They do it well, and they do it well often. And then, land utilisation is the other one, Bryn, which is really, the ability to actually grow either multiple crops on the same area of land, and utilise that land better throughout the season. So obviously that would be determined by where you are and where you grow and what you can grow at different times of year. But certainly the optimising land use is one of the notable attributes that we can see, that growers are planting multiple crops. So they're using that land. Okay, their costs per hectare are certainly higher, but their revenues are certainly much higher as well. Yeah. Okay, so 1920, let's skip through again. So that, 1920 and 2021 results. So a really big, this graph is not scaled particularly any way, except that we had to capitalise or capture the income of the top 25%, which you can see there is a massive, very close to $160,000 per hectare. So again, crop type, multiple crops, time of season that you're growing in terms of getting a better price. So I think there's a couple of things that are sitting in that top 25% group, but you can see that grey line, or that grey, dark grey, black line, bar graph is showing the costs per hectare. So the green is the income, the grey is the cost per hectare, and then the blue is the operating profit per hectare. And you can see the difference between the average of the industry and the top 25 is that the actual cost per hectare are not much different at all. It's about,
they're pretty identical, aren't they?
Yeah, it's $4,000 or $5,000 a hectare. So it's not a very big number at all in terms of the cost per hectare when you think about the revenue that per hectare that can be gained. But you can just see that massive difference in revenues, the average of the industry and the top. So, and that is obviously having a big contributor to that light blue bar, which is the operating profit. And obviously the bottom of the industry, really needing to make some decisions as to what they're doing and whether they still want to be in the industry. So 1920, a couple of ratios or some key areas to look at that we like to look at. And one is labour, and obviously very topical at the moment. And one of the things we were looking at and look at quite regularly in horticulture is wages as a percentage of income. But I think you can see by that graph on the left-hand side that the wages as a percentage of income is now skewed because of such large incomes of the top 25%. Yeah. So the green bars here being the top 25 and the average being the black. And you can see that the 12% of income as wages as a percentage of income is 12%, and the top 25 is because their income was so high. So yes. I think what's probably just as relevant to look at is the wages as a percentage of operating costs. So as a chunk of your costs, wages we know is the biggest one of those for horticulture. So what does that difference look like for the top 25 versus the industry? And you can see there that in this 1920 year, it was 25% for the top 25 versus 34 for the average of the industry. So a significant difference, albeit the actual cost of labour per hectare was similar.
Yes.
Okay, so...
And this has nothing to do with mechanisation either, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, there's nothing here that's related to mechanisation being in the top 25%. So are some in there? Yep. But some that have mechanisation are not. So I think that's a good point. The operating efficiency, obviously that target number of 70% that we've talked about before. So you can see the top 25% were well down on the operating efficiency. So the target was well met by the top 25%, but obviously the average of the industry there pushing close to 80. So, I think this is one of the things where businesses, as part of this project, are really starting to dive into what that means for them. Where is it? Is it in the costs? Is it in the income, or is it a combination of both? And what can we have an effect on? And obviously to the right there, we've got our vegetable income per hectare. That I mentioned that before, the massive difference. And then the return on capital, the average of the industry just doing over 6%, and the top 25 doing just under 20. A big difference between the best and the average. 2021, so similar type results. I guess what we're showing is not a lot of difference between. You can see the pattern there. Bryn is higher income for slightly higher costs. So we did see in 2021. If I just skip back to this one, so the top 25% in 1920 were spending just under $80,000 in hectare. In 2021, that number pushed closer to just under $100,000 a hectare. So again, more growers in the data set of a different type, which is giving us some more strength around the data. So, but still a large difference in income between the average and the top 25.
You can still see that big difference of what they're actually getting on in terms of their returns.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And similar results to the 1920 year, with the wages as a percent of operating costs. So you can see then in the top 25% are 28% of their income, of their operating costs, and the average of the industry sitting at 33, which was very similar. The average of the industry at 34 the year before. So we're starting to get some really good numbers now around what the actual costs should be of labour as a percentage of operating costs. And then your operating efficiency, again, you can see the lower number for top 25, which is what we're after, and the average of the industry still sitting up around that 80%, which is just way too high. Vegetable incomes and then return on capital, a much tougher year for the vegetable guys in that year, which is affecting the overall results.
There's almost a difference of like 20 cents between the top 25 and the average there, isn't there? In terms of how much they're spending to make that dollar.
That's right. Yeah. So the I think they were just the 61%, I think it was, for the top 25 versus nearly the 80. So 18 cents in every dollar more is being spent by the average of the industry. Yep, to make that dollar. So that, to me, that would be a real place to go and look at your business.
Yeah.
Okay. We're very lucky to have that previous project, Bryn. So we've been able to pull together 5 years of data. So this is the 5 years of data from vegetables, which includes right back to 17-18 year and all the way through this last couple of years that we've analysed. So we're really starting to get some strong data now in vegetables across a range of vegetables. The average operating efficiency, it seems to remain at a constant level now between 74 and 77%, and the return on capital for the industry somewhere between that 6 and 8%. So we're starting to get some really good numbers, and they're not always just the same growers. The grower numbers are increasing each year, so we're actually getting different growers in. So that's not just the data set of the same old growers from 5 years ago. So I think what's really interesting there is if I look at this 74 to 77% operating efficiency, that's the area where growers need to concentrate.
Yeah,
And this is the data, a really strong data set now, which gives you that individual year ups and downs and how they move. So it's good to see this from 16-17 through to 2021. And you can see the variations there. If we look at operating profit per hectare, we've gone from 16-17 of nearly $13,000. And then obviously as the data set's got much stronger, we're starting to get a more relevant or relative, I reckon, to what's happening in the industry, which is that up around that $25,000-$30,000 a hectare of operating profit. The operating efficiency sits at that 75 and still above that target that we believe the industry should target for, which is 70%. So, but a return on capital, you wouldn't sneeze at that, Bryn. I mean, as a 5-year average, you're not too far away from the 8% that we like to target in Planfarm to have a business double its wealth over 10 years with that sort of return. And importantly is the equity change. And this is just, again, the strength of the businesses that are involved in the project, which has been really enlightening for us, is that better and stronger businesses are interested in looking at what's happening in their business, and so they're coming into the project, and we're starting to see that flow through. And bearing in mind, there is a bit of land value increase happening there. So land values have increased significantly the last couple of years, and that will be picking up on some of that as well. But that's still real. It's a real number in the balance sheet. And I'd just like to look at draw people's attention to this graph down in the bottom left-hand corner. This is the operating profit result and the operating efficiency, and you can see the variations from year to year. So the bar graphs are the dollars per hectare, and then the line is the operating efficiency. And obviously what we want to see here, Bryn, is that over time, these businesses in the industry are actually driving a bar graph that's going upwards to the right. Yeah. And the operating efficiency is coming downwards, because that's when you're actually producing, it's almost a crossover. You're producing more operating profit to then pay for overheads and expand or invest in off-farm. So, quite pleasingly, a pretty good result.
I think it's worth noting 1920 was an interesting year. We had a lot of fire and floods over at the east. But also it caught that tail end of the WA stay-at-home COVID period when restaurants were shut and people were at home, and I think probably, scared for their lives, everybody started to eat their 5 portions of veg and fruit a day.
So again, I mean, that would be, is it a demand thing? Is it a price thing, or is it just the saleable yield thing? So those that are producing
some more investigation.
Yeah, certainly. But certainly one thing that a longer term analysis and being part of a project like this does is that it actually picks up those years, but also picks up these years in 16-17, which was TPP. And you start to get a feeling of what's actually happening in the industry. But more so, I think the important thing here is that this operating efficiency is just such a big area for growers to focus on. What are they doing? What can they do to improve that? Is it mechanisation? There's a lot of these things being thought of at the moment. And I think if you think about mechanisation and labour costs on its own for a minute, then you've got businesses that are showing increase in equity. So their balance sheet is strong. So their capacity, their borrowing capacity, or their capacity to fund business expansion, and that might be in mechanisation, is quite strong. If the businesses were poor equity or down around the 70%, then their capitalisation, the capital in the business to use to then invest into productivity gains would be limited. But we're finding that there actually is good equity in businesses that are well capitalised, and that is an area they need to look at to actually see if they can bring down operating efficiency, because that will drive their profit.
It's a big focus, I guess, for each individual business, but I guess for like vegetablesWA and other industry bodies to consider, the future prosperity of an industry as what can we systematically do to start bringing that line down as well.
Yeah, if anything at all, but where's the support needed? Because I think it's one thing to say, businesses are wealthy because they have 84% equity, but they still have to make a return on that. They still have to make a living on that. And if if that is the case, then these are the areas we need to be looking at. Hence why we did that cost analysis.
Yes.
For many growers was, okay, if these costs have gone up, how much do you have to recoup in extra price? You know, how much do you have to go to your supplier and say, well, look, my costs have gone up by 5 cents per kilo, 10 cents per kilo, whatever the number is. I need that just to stop going backwards. So that's, you know, I think the data is very strong.